Hello, you're watching news from Kazakhstan. It is Tuesday, September 25th. I am Nurbek Savitakhunov. Kazakhstan gets a new prime minister, the biggest and most expected political news in a row of staff reshuffles in the highest echelons of power that began last Friday was the resignation of Karim Masimov and his appointment as chief of staff. He sent in his request to the national leader in the morning, and in the afternoon, Nursultan Nazarbayev offered Deputy Prime Minister Serik Akhmetov's candidacy for Parliament's consideration. As usual, parliamentarians voted yes unanimously. Cabinet head Karim Masimov, also known as the old-timer, has voluntarily resigned Monday morning. The president accepted his resignation and 3 hours later issued a decree appointing him the chief of staff. Later in the afternoon, the nation's leader personally explained the reasons for the prime minister's resignation during the meeting of the ruling party's political council. Usually the government is reshuffled at times when the situation dictates so, when economic and social positions of the country are weakened, or when the public is demanding it. But in our case, the prime minister submitted his resignation, which he tried to do last year as well. When the person is tired and wants to change the post, when he explains his reasoning and says that the new premier is needed, I have to respond, and thus I accepted his resignation this time. The cabinet did not have to wait for the new prime minister for long. By afternoon, in the best traditions of the Soviet Politburo, the ruling fraction unanimously approved the new candidate suggested by the president, making Serik Akhmetov, previously the vice prime minister close to Masimov, the new cabinet head. Last Friday, president's advisor Yermuhamed Yertizbayev leaked this information to the press, and on Monday he came up with a new forecast, saying that no major changes should be expected in relations to the rest of the cabinet. The backbone of the government will remain intact. It's only 3 months until the year end, and it is important that all the budget funds allocated for the program of industrial innovation and other government projects are implemented. The former presidential candidate Musakhali Duambekov this time agreed with the advisor, not seeing any key changes ahead. At the same time, Duambekov says there will be nothing positive in the further political course of the country, which will now be under Karim Masimov's charge. I do not think that the former prime minister will change anything after becoming the head of the president's administration responsible for the political course of the country. Everything will remain the same. It is rather interesting that Karim Masimov, who was replaced on Monday by Serik Akhmetov, served as a replacement for another Akhmetov, Daniel, back in 2007. The new government has not been formed yet, but experts do not expect any out-of-the-blue appointments. So far, only 2 names have been revealed. The governor of Karaganda, Baurjan Abdishov, will become the deputy minister of environment, and the current minister of economic development and trade, Bakhtjan Sagintayev, is now the first deputy chairman of the ruling party. Karim Masimov headed the government longest of all. In spite of the fact that he was threatened resignation and criticized several times, he was able to hold on to his seat no less than 6 years. Our reporters recall the brightest moments in Masimov's prime ministership. While the country was just starting to feel the financial crisis in 2007, Karim Masimov became prime minister. Born in Almaty region with several diplomas and fluent in 5 languages, he replaced Daniel Akhmetov. It is important for me to say this right now, on this particular day. Nursultan Nazarbayev, at some point you have put your trust in me by appointing me as your assistant. I would like to say that I am, and always will be your faithful assistant. Karim Masimov repeated this oath during his government several more times, even without changing the words. In fact, he backed up his loyalty with his actions. Later in time, the experts and Nursultan Nazarbayev himself acknowledged that overcoming the crisis successfully, in their opinion, had to do with Masimov, although the prime minister with a slightly meek personality was periodically urged to be a bit tougher. Dear Mr. Masimov, it is about time you put yourself together and actually begin to work decently. Yet it was worth it after all. Masimov managed to last in the chair of the prime minister longer than any of his predecessors, almost 6 years, in spite of the resignation repeatedly predicted by his detractors. The scandals related to his father did not help the situation. Protest actions against Masimov Sr. were held in the capital on a regular basis. In May of 2010, a female entrepreneur from Shymkent attempted to jump off the construction crane in Astana. I will jump off the crane. I do not have another option. The crusade on corruption among authorities and high-profile arrests of senior officials also took place during Karim Masimov. In 2008, Jaksebek Kulikeyev, the president of Kazakhstan, Timir Joly, was arrested for bribery. A year later, former Minister of Ecology Nurlan Iskakov was charged with embezzlement of budget funds. Later, a few more arrests of the leadership of Ministry of Health, Land Resources Management and Statistics agencies. In 2012, the chairman of the Customs Committee, Serik Baymagambetov, appeared before the court. A very first active Twitter user in the cabinet of ministers, he introduced a trend of tablets and communication through social networks among government employees. The prime minister's profile was the most popular among the rest of Kazakh officials. At some point, there even was a web page dedicated to the mustache of the prime minister. There were times when Masimov stayed in his office late at night, responding to people's questions on the internet. A few times he used that as an example of hard work with his subordinates. However, the Twitter messages from striking oil workers of Zhanaozen remained unanswered. Lately, the coalition of Karim Masimov and the president's middle son-in-law, Timur Kulibayev, has been in the spotlight. There are fewer appearances on TV screens and less public statements. The prime minister became more popular than the president himself, and therefore he was forced to lay low, said his foes. But in fact, it turned out to be quite the opposite. The leader of the nation entrusted the currently former prime minister the most key position in the president's team. That, according to experts, is a definite raise for Karim Masimov.
Analysts and opponents of Acordado do not expect radical changes from the staff reshuffle in the power vertical. They analyze it as the national leaders attempt to lessen the influence of Musin's clan and strengthen weaker groups on the political field. As for Masimov, he was on the brink of dismissal for 6 years. However, the national leader always threw in a lifeline on time.
Karim Masimov left the post in the Cabinet Council as a political long-liver. He had been holding his post for 5 years and 8 months. His resignation and designation to a new post, head of the presidential administration, is not as surprising as the resignation of Aslan Musin, his predecessor, who is considered a political heavyweight. The president now needs to strike a balance within the ruling elite, the balance that had been upset due to enforcing Aslan Musin's group as well as Karim Masimov's group to some extent. They are going to be separated soon. Bolsun Abdildin, an ex-communist leader, notes that Prime Minister Masimov is sort of an engine for national leaders' ambitious ideas, such as creating Eurasian and customs unions, launching industrial and innovative projects, moving towards the uniform labor community. The respected politician believes that Masimov failed in executing the project. However, the trump card of high oil prices helped remedy the situation. People no longer believe the statements in those high-profile projects. The reason is rather simple. There were no tangible results. There is one more politician who reminds the ex-prime minister of the social and public conflicts and economic crisis. Bulat Abilov is certain that Masimov is to blame for his passive attitude during Zhanaozen riots and for his reluctance to resolve the labor conflict in Mangostar region. It is not clear which is worse, a weak character of the cabinet council's head or a harsh and, as the opposition notes, even cruel approach of the president's former administration. Nazarbayev always tests the people around him, and now the president's administration takes the blow for the tragic events in Zhanaozen. It is because the president's administration knew from the very beginning what was going on. They took the decisions and gave the orders to the policemen and military. Time has come to switch the officials in their positions, and the feud of the ruling clans should also be taken into account. New assignments, but the same faces. This was the reaction of Mikhail Sizov, the opposition member. He says that we should not be expecting any dramatic reforms from the old players on the political arena. It is the old political system that does not legalize Alga Party and took its leader, Vladimir Kozlov, to court on charges of promoting social hatred. The opposition and Vladimir Kozlov as one of the opposition's leader is a trouble for the existing political system, irrespective of the people who are now representing this system. And since they are undesirable for the system, I'm not expecting any positive changes in Kozlov's case, and the new prime minister and new head of the president's administration will not change things for the better. The president's administration's opponents, as well as other observers, believe that appointment of the new prime minister will result in partial changes in the government composition. They forecast that even if the cabinet reshuffle does occur, it will be within the people of Musin's clan.
Almaty residents reacted calmly towards the government reshuffle. They are not expecting serious changes after Serik Akhmetov's appointment as prime minister. As it turns out, more than half of respondents are not familiar with his achievements as deputy prime minister. The newly appointed chief of staff Karim Masimov has left a similar impression on Almaty residents.
Запомнился, мне кажется, много, что он сделал для независимой республики нашей, Казахстана. А чем конкретно сейчас, подождите.
He was on TV a lot, and that's why he's remembered in independent Kazakhstan, but I can't name any of his achievements. I haven't heard about Serik Akhmetov, but I have heard about Daniel Akhmetov.
Я слышала Даниила Ахметова.
Честно говоря, мало чего.
There's not much I can recall. I don't know Daniel or Serik Akhmetov.
Daniel Akhmetov?
Нет, Серик Ахметов.
Нет, не знаю.
There's nothing special about him. I don't know Serik Akhmetov. His name doesn't ring a bell.
Ничем. Особо так как бы за политикой.
Nothing I can say. I'm not following political life. I don't know Serik Akhmetov, but I have heard of Daniel Akhmetov.
Нет, не знаю. Daniel Akhmetova знаю.
Moving on to other news, an address appeared on the internet which was allegedly signed by Akjol party chairman Azat Pirowashev. In it, the politician admits to betraying the principles of the party and the president himself.
The letter published on behalf of Pirowashev says that it was Aslan Musin, the former Nazarbayev's chief of staff, who brought him to the position of the party's leader. Musin personally helped Pirowashev during elections by taking advantage of administrative resources, among other things. This document also mentions the president's son-in-law Timur Kulibayev, who, together with other businessmen, supposedly invested in the development of Akjol. Azat Pirowashev allegedly made this confession to prevent the repeat of Zhanaozen events. However, a rebuttal followed shortly after the letter was published, with the party leader officially saying that the document is fake and those behind it will be taken to court. Some of the sites publish things without even checking first whether it's a fake or not. We are going to resolve this in a legal way.
The son of former chief of staff and current accounting committee head Aslan Musin, Asılbek, has left the country, reports Guljan.org. Undisclosed sources allege that Musin's son is fleeing a controversial court case in which separatism may play a central role.
According to preliminary data, Asılbek Musin, Rizkaliyev's business partner and part-time emir of the so-called Kuranites, has left Kazakhstan following the brothers. Our sources say that the emir left the country with his wife and 3 children. We attempted to reach Mr. Musin, but his mobile phone was turned off and Skype is forwarding messages. Asılbek Musin is known in Kazakhstan as the leader of his Giamal religious movement. Some experts considered his activity controversial, linking him to the so-called Kuranites. Musin Jr. himself refuted his involvement in the movement in one of his interviews. Guljan.org also noted that the complete collapse of one of the most influential clans is fairly obvious now. The publication suggests the possibility of a series of high-profile trials throughout the regions in the nearest future, following the corruption scandals in Atyrau and Aktobe. Of course, the clash among clans is a bad thing. Unlike in other countries, instead of parties, social movements and society affecting politics, we have groups, clans, neighbors, classmates, etc.
Suspected terrorist Aldiyar Saparov, the only survivor of the special operation in Kulsari, was placed under a 2-month arrest at the decision of the court.
Beybaris village residents hospitalized with serious injuries on September 12 came to senses last week and was transferred from the intensive care unit. According to the investigation, Saparov and 5 others resisted arrest after police suspected them of involvement in the bombing of a private house in Atyrau. During the special operation, all suspects except Saparov were eliminated. In addition, a number of officials have been arrested in Atyrau with sanctions for house arrest issued for Director of State Expertise Turlanbek Dzhinbayev, Director of LLP Arkaim 2005 Alexander Kuzema, and Director of Stroy Contract Group Azamat Kurmantayev, all suspected of embezzling public funds allocated for the construction of municipal infrastructure.
Meanwhile, Atyrau City's new leadership is dictating its own rules in the region. The administration cancelled entrance fees to the train station square. They were established during former Mayor Bergay Rizkaliyev's rule, and as was often noted by local residents, the mayor's office made money out of thin air.
We've been receiving complaints from local residents and drivers about paid entrance to the train station area. With the governor's decision, we've terminated the contract with the company on a mutual consent. The deputy governor didn't say the name of the company, but local mass media indicates it belonged to someone from the team of the former governor Rizkaliyev. Previously, the fee to enter the train station was about 70 cents per car. Considering that over 1,000 vehicles pass the gates every day, the company appears to make substantial profit. However, a free entrance policy is already causing problems, and now the space is overcrowded, causing frequent traffic jams near the station.
Now on to the case over inciting social hatred. Prosecutor Zhanaev requests a verdict of 4 to 9 years in prison for defendants. For Alha party leader Vladimir Kozlov specifically, the prosecution is requesting an indictment under Articles 164, 235, and 170, accusing him of inciting social hatred, creating and managing an organized criminal group, as well as calling for a violent overthrow of the constitutional regime, which in total amount to 9 years in jail. Akshanat Aminov is requested to be convicted to 5 years in prison, while Serik Sapargali to 4.
The prosecutor noted that should defendants actively repent in court, they can receive a milder sentence. Zhanaev also said that the decision was not easy, and the court had to take into account that both Vladimir Kozlov and Akshanat Aminov have underage children, while Serik Sapargali made a partial confession.
Хотя в суде мы видели, что
The guilt wasn't proven during the trial, and the prosecutor's speech was not about legal issues. He spoke of things he knows nothing about, like who said what. I now have an impression that he's offended by the fact that ethnic Kazakhs speak well of Kozlov and ethnic Russian.
говорил не только о юридической составляющей.
Процесс
This is a purely political process, and the verdict was expected, but I still hope that the prosecution could have been influenced by human factors, although it was clear that they are acting on the authorities' orders. Now we can see that such orders are implemented rigorously, and all words of the prosecutor were out of place. This was not a legal speech, but they had to say something to make it at least seem that way. This is quite understandable, but quite painful nevertheless.
Но мы видим, что у нас
The very first part of the speech of the state prosecutor reminded of a political lecture to first-year students of the historical faculty. For around an hour, the state prosecutor lectures about the history of Kazakhs who dreamed of freedom and independence for centuries, and how hard it was to achieve it. In between the speech, the prosecution demonstrated videos numerously shown during the investigation and during the court hearings.
The gist of the prosecution's position is that the leader of Alga Party, Vladimir Kozlov, and his associates created an organized criminal group to overthrow the constitutional order using financial resources of banker Mukhtar Ablyazov. To implement these plans, Kozlov allegedly needed to find some weakness of the authorities, and Zhanaozian was singled out for this purpose. There, legally illiterate workers became puppets in the hands of the opposition leaders. According to the prosecution, media resources affiliated with Ablyazov, namely Golos Respubliki, Stan.kz and K+, were also involved in the case. Prosecutors believe that the leaflets attributed to Ablyazov serve as the main evidence of inciting social hatred, along with Skype conference with the leader of Alga Party, although it had little to offer to trial observers, except for jokes and long speeches about color revolutions in Kyrgyzstan, Georgia and Ukraine.
Relatives of convicts from a Karaganda prison and several other special institutions, which are located in the region, gathered in front of the Senate demanding to stop tortures in local prisons. They also demanded a meeting with the leadership of the upper chamber of parliament.
People decided to come to Astana after the latest incidents, when internal troops were sent to the correctional institution in Karabas village on September 20th. Inmate families claimed their close ones were brutally beaten. People have earlier turned to parliament asking for help in stopping tortures in local prisons, but received no reply. None of senators came to speak to inmate family members, and a secretary just promised to pass the message to the person in charge, although failing to specify who exactly will handle the issue and when. There appears to be around 1,000 convicts now in Karabas prison. However, the facility administration only showed the families a video with only 30 people on it. Relatives are now concerned about the lives of the rest. I want to make sure that my husband is well and alive, as I don't know if he was beaten or not. I don't even know if he's there now. I know nothing. I have not seen him. 30 people were on the video, but I didn't even get to watch it. I don't know what is happening to him now.
In other news, the 15th Congress of Writers in Almaty ended in a scandal on Monday. Former advisor to the governor of West Kazakhstan region, Alpamus Berturganov, who spent 3 years in prison for slander, expressed his discontent with his dismissal from the Writers' Union. According to him, it is time for the organization to change its head, Nurlan Orazalin. Reporters of Azatlik Radio were present at this meeting.
Dear friends, this is disgraceful. The trio has approved the decision to expel me from the Writers' Union. This happens under the chairmanship of Nurlan Arazalin. For the last 18 years, everywhere I look, I only see Nurlan Arazalin doing this and that. For how long are you going to put up with this? When are you going to start acting like real writers? People look up to you. When are you going to stop following this script? For 15 years, Bekturganov was not only a member of the organization, but also the head of its Western Kazakhstan branch. Over the years, he has not received any remarks, but the trouble started after July 15, 2009, when the writer allowed himself several unflattering remarks about the governor of West Kazakhstan region.
National Patriots, headed by poet Mukhtar Shakhanov, organized an action in support of the state language during the weekend. This time, the sanctioned action was dedicated to the 23rd anniversary of the law on language, when Kazakh language received the status of state language in Kazakhstan, while Russian was declared as an official language.
Some work was done to prevent students from showing up at the meeting. Many were informed of the upcoming event, but we see no youth here. That was all done by the authorities. Still, people did come, and we are grateful they showed up. No more than 200 people turned up for the peaceful rally, which was not good news for the patriots. Those who did come spoke of the lack of attention the authorities pay to the issue of Kazakh language. No one monitors the implementation of current legislation, and that is exactly why the patriots took the initiative in their own hands and demanded the parliament to review the law on state language, which was prepared by non-governmental organizations. It is also noted that the initiative will not set a prejudice towards Russian language in any way. The authorities, being what they are, do not want to hear anything contradicting their opinion. They want to have something that consolidates the people. In this country, it is the language. This is not the fault of Kazakhs or people of other ethnicities. The authorities are to blame here, because it is much easier for them to rule a divided country. On the eve of the meeting, poet Mukhtar Shakhanov appealed to the Kazakh intellectuals with another call to support the idea of the nationwide referendum. One of the potential questions would deal with Kazakhstan's entry into the Eurasian Union. National patriots believe that the country does not need such an integration with Russia and Belarus. The politicians and experts plan to discuss the details of the referendum at a roundtable on September 25, 2012. We joined the Eurasian and customs unions on crushing terms. Not many people know that Kazakhstan only has 12% of the votes in the customs union, while Russia holds 75%, which means we basically joined Russia and became a Russian colony.
An accident occurred in Temirtau during the filming of the movie about the leader of the nation. A platform collapsed when a crowd of 20 people was standing on it at the moment. One of the victims had a triple leg fracture. Right now, the young woman is in hospital. More details in the next report.
I wished it was a bad dream. I do not want to think about it. 23-year-old Regina Bender tearfully recalls the day of the filming. She was an extra in the bath of the leader. She fell down from a height of 3 meters and broke her leg in 3 places. Regina said she wanted to make some extra money, about $15 for a day's shooting, but instead ended up in the hospital. Another extra, Diana Sarkisyan, was more fortunate and only bruised her back. She will be discharged from the hospital soon. I just remember that I was pushed to the center of the crowd of 20 people. I turned to look back at the main extra when we all started falling. I felt that somebody fell on me, and it all happened in a split second that I did not even scream. The incident occurred in the old part of Temirtau. By now, all sets have been torn and removed. According to the line producer of Nursultan Nazarbayev's biopic, the accident was caused by a collapsed platform made of wooden planks and attached to an old building. The platform could not hold the weight of all people when they gathered on one side of it. Although the director warned them to break up, they did not listen to him. Such incidents sometimes happen in the film industry. It happened before, and we sometimes do fall and break our bones. All injured parties received first-time compensation of $135 from the film producers, who say they will assist the girls until they fully recover. The trilogy Path of the Leader tells the story of Nursultan Nazarbayev's rise. The first part, The Sky of My Childhood, was released a year ago, and now filmmakers are working simultaneously on the second and third parts, The Iron Mountain and Fiery River.
This is all we have time for now. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow.